We had it working just a second ago. There you go. You've all heard it said, the moment you think that your life is about to end, you see your whole life flashing before your eyes. But that's not the way it happened with me. What I remember was grass. Lots of grass. I remember the sound of grass as I was running away from my pursuer. I remember the feeling of grass as I was running through the savannah fields, brushing against my shins. I also remember the sight of a machete landing in the grass just a few feet away from me. You see, what had happened was I was growing up in Morogoro. And in Morogoro, there was a man named Wakila. And Wakila was a notorious madman. I'm not talking this kind of madman. I'm talking something more like this kind of a madman. And so my friend and I, we're in preschool, and we're on our way home, and we're walking down a trail in Tanzania. And as we're walking, we're talking, and we're next to us is like a field of grass, really tall grass, and up there is the main road. And as we're walking, we turn around and we notice that there's a man walking behind us. And that's okay. And the man, we notice, is carrying a machete, one of these things. That's also okay. The problem, no really, in Tanzania, a man carrying a machete, he came from the sugar cane fields, it's alright. The problem is, the man was Wakila. And we knew that Wakila was crazy. And so, my genius friends decide that this is the best moment to basically have an extracurricular school activity. And he turns around to this madman walking behind us and he yells, "Wakila! Kicha!" Which is Swahili means, "Wakila, you're crazy!" The guy's crazy. And so the guy looks at these two kids and he decides, okay, today's a great day to kill myself 6-year-olds. And the man comes charging at us. And so we end up running into the fields. All I remember was grass. I don't even remember the name of my friend. If I was to look at Wakila's face today, I wouldn't know who he is. I couldn't pick him up from a lineup. I remember grass. Why is that? Because grass was my life. Grass was my survival route. Grass was the way I escaped out of the problem. So all I remember was grass. My brain had seared itself to focus on what was most important at that time. Now I really hope none of you can relate to a story like that. It's a true story. It really did happen to me. But I do think all of you can relate to the feeling of fight or flight. You may have never been chased by a madman wielding a machete, trying to end your life. But we've all experienced fight or flight. That moment of amazing clarity, when the world is distilled into a single binary decision. All the signals have been processed, and there is one choice. To put them up and fight, or to go home. Fight or flight. Now your body does some really inspired things in the moment of fight or flight. For example, one of the things that they notice that happens is something that they describe as tunnel vision. Tunnel vision is where you are actually seeing less information, or you're processing less information, let me say. But they say that your pupils actually dilate. You're actually receiving more light. There is more light signal coming into your eyes and into your brain, into your head, but you're actually seeing and noticing less. All I could remember was grass. Tunnel vision. I wonder if you guys ever considered why it is that our brains work this way. Why it is that we have a level of processing that can process much more information than we are aware of. We have a subconscious, operating, busy, a service worker, a load balancer, just beneath the level of our awareness. Why is it that the human operating system works this way? Well, let's consider this. If I was to ask any one of you, what is the image that we see behind me? I don't think it would come as a surprise if all of us said we're seeing a ballerina doing a pirouette. There'll only be a few crazy among us who would say, okay, I'm noticing it's a green floor, you know, there's a light switch somewhere to the left side, there's a green curtain. That's not what the picture is about. The picture is about a ballerina doing a pirouette. You ignore all the information that's not relevant. And even right now, at this moment, if you pay attention, you can hear that fan or the air conditioner, the clinking of glasses. But you didn't notice that just a few seconds ago, did you? What were you paying attention to? The man speaking to you on the stage. Yet, those sounds, those signals were not beyond your notice. They were being processed by your subconscious. Your body does this because if you could not process all the massive signals that are coming into your area of awareness, you would be overloaded. It does this so that you can have the best opportunity to make the most of life at each moment that it counts. I like to think of the subconscious as a user experience strategy. And by looking at the subconscious from this perspective, we can look at how the body essentially models for us a strategy for dealing with information abundance. Moore's Law, this has been about 50 years since Moore's Law, and Moore's Law basically stated, Moore was an engineer, I think it was an Intel or Dell, it was an Intel, he was an engineer in Silicon Valley, and he came up with a hypothesis based on data that he saw. And the hypothesis was basically that the amount of processing power that can be contained in chips would roughly double every 2 years. And so the rate of the power of computing would increase faster and faster as we move into the future. So it wasn't linear, it was exponential. And that's the power of Moore's Law. And so in 50 years, we went from computers that you have to walk into to computers that you can wear on your wrist or carry in your pocket. As computers increase in their power, and we can vacuum more information into the computer and process them, and have that information processed back to us, signals increase, information increases. Systems come online, systems are connected. We have information and signals, and we have derivatives of information and signals. Information increases, but your attention span doesn't. Your ability to process information does not increase. Attention is finite. It doesn't scale. Computers do. We live in a world of information abundance. And if you think of what we've experienced in 50 years has been going from information scarcity, where we did search, now to information abundance, where things are being pushed to us through notification, if you think that's been major, we're about to experience information deluge. Tell me, what's common about these things? A car, a book, glasses, and a cigarette. What do these things have in common? Each one of these things today has a version that runs on a battery purely electric. In the past, they were mechanical. Today, these are computers. They're branded. We have names for them. Kindle, for one. It's easy to understand, especially if you're mathematically given, to understand the sense of Moore's Law in terms of numbers and graphs. What is far harder to appreciate are the implications of Moore's Law. But if you were going to summarize the implications of Moore's Law as a designer or a developer or someone wanting to be ready for the platforms of the future or understanding the bigger picture of what you're working in, Moore's Law means that anything that can be a computer very soon will be a computer. They call it the Internet of Things. And so we have systems that are scaling and are growing and that can process more things, and we're vacuuming data. But your attention doesn't scale. And the reason why this is such an important user experience problem, or a concept to consider, is because attention is the way that we actually live life. You cannot experience much more of life than what you can pay attention to. So the things that I cannot see upside there, they don't really have much of an impact right to my immediate experience. And the things that I don't notice you guys doing on your laptops as you ignore me don't have an impact on me. But the things that I'm aware of, the things that do come into my attention, those things are the way that I live life. And so we live life essentially at the speed of attention, at the rate of how we can pay attention. But because attention doesn't scale, it's a critical design component of how we live our lives. I want to tell you what it looks like when you're not able to pay attention. Because attention is precious, and we even have idioms to describe that. You spend attention, you pay attention. I want you guys to meet this guy. His name is Stephen Wiltshire, British man. Stephen Wiltshire was born mute. But at the age of around 34, 32, Stephen Wiltshire was awarded to be a knight in the Order of the British Empire. Why? Because Stephen Wiltshire was absolutely brilliant. He can do this. He has a photographic memory that's absolutely bizarre. They fly him over with a helicopter over the city, and with a couple of minutes just looking at the city, he's able to reproduce it on paper, almost photorealistic, the numbers of the windows, the proportions of the steeples. He's brilliant, but his brilliance doesn't actually come from something that you don't have. Apparently, people who study people who are autistic, like him, who are savants, they say that you and I have the same processing power as he does. In you is the same ability to see everything that's going on right here and remember its proportions and its dynamics. It's not what Stephen actually has, it's what he doesn't have that enables him to do what he does. He doesn't have that layer of processing which allows him to ignore things, so he can pay attention to the things that are important, to make the most of his life. He doesn't. There is no filter. He doesn't have a filter bubble. What he sees is what he gets, and it just goes all into his awareness. That doesn't happen with you. You will notice what he notices, but your subconscious will ignore it before it comes into the level of awareness. So what seems like a bug, tunnel vision, fight or flight, forgetfulness, are actually features. Why? It's a user experience strategy to allow you to get the most out of life, so that you don't operate autistically. So that you don't notice, for example, you're not distracted by the spinach that's hanging from my teeth when you're trying to shake my hand. So that you can actually focus on the bigger picture. It's a user experience strategy. Attention is the ultimate finite resource when it comes to human-computer interaction. It is scarce, it is zero-sum. Where it's taken in one place, it is given at another place. It doesn't just multiply. And attention, as it relates to computer systems, absolutely does not scale. The way your body handles the management of your attention is by your values. It's by the things you love and you fear. For some of you, when you see clowns, it's happy memories, it's I want to laugh. For some of us, we got to go to the bathroom and we can change our pants. The same signal is processed differently by different people. But at the root of it, it's about your values, and they're personal, and it's private information. Your body uses this information to say, okay, if I hear this voice crying, that's my baby, I gotta pay attention. When I'm hearing these people in the crowd, that's just a bunch of hooligans. Doesn't require much processing. All of these things are happening below your level of awareness, but your body's busy making value judgments about what's important for you, what's going to give you the most out of your life. Now imagine, is there a way that you can encode this behavior? If you can encode the way you manage your attention, you can encode your identity. Because the way you manage your attention is a reflection of your subconscious, the values your subconscious makes. And the values your subconscious makes are very personal and private. It's always about you. Even if they're not exclusively about you, it is very relevant to who you are. If you can encode attention management, if you can model the subconscious, you actually have a way, a strategy for mapping identity. We have systems that actually do this today. We actually have attention management systems. They may appear like content management systems. They may be labeled as aggregators and filter bubbles. But what they're actually doing is they're managing your attention. They're funneling your attention through electronic and digital and software systems. And the buttons you have on your phone and on your browsers, those are inputs and a mechanism for you to make decisions, to prompt the system. And they take information, gathering it from all over the world, and they filter it and order it and present it to you. Just like your subconscious. And so your subconscious, your digital profile, your social media profile, is your subconscious living on the web. It's your little ghost in the shell that lived in North America the desert, going through the wires. These systems are attention management systems. All of them are aggregators and filters. And by the way, there are much more than the ones I have up here. Google search, Bing search, Pocket app, attention management systems. Now all of them aggregate information and they filter. That's like the basic models of the user experience. Collect information, you give it signifiers, where I am, who are my friend networks, you upload your address book, and then they take content that's coming to the system, some of it you're feeding, and they aggregate it for you, and they deliver it to you. Where they differ, however, is the way that they're modeling behavior and attitudes. And that's why, for example, it makes sense, at least if you think about it in a user experience perspective, that Facebook would spend, like, I think, $19 billion to buy an application like WhatsApp. It was growing at a phenomenal rate. And the thing that WhatsApp had created or discovered in a very simple messaging app was essentially a user behavior messaging that they had been able to execute on. And you have apps, for example, like Vine, Snapchat, which to the older generation, we think that's totally crazy. I don't even get why you would do that. But to the younger generation, they have basically had their latent behaviors surfaced. And these applications surface the latent behavior that we have, a way that we manage our attention, exposing our fears and our hopes, and they digitize that and they sell them these, well, they give them out as these products. And essentially it's a map of how you want to manage your attention. Or at least they convince you this is how you want to manage your attention. And so you build these habits. You pull out your phone, you scroll through your Twitter feed, you put your phone back on, the next minute you pull it out and you scroll through your Twitter feed. It's about how you're managing your attention. It's about all these impulses that are coming out of you. And so each one of these connected and digital systems, which have human relationships as part of their core, they're attention management systems, but they're all modeling that behavior. They have different strategies on how to approach that. They take data, and each one of them has a different algorithm or a different model for how you use their software and make some deduction of what is of interest to you or what's important for you and at what time. Twitter works very different from YouTube, and it works very different from search, it works very different from other social networks. They have different models, but essentially what they create is they take data and they take how you work with that data and they create sort of like an algorithm that is unique for you for what's important and valuable to you. And at the other end of that user experience are the notifications and the prompts and the triggers that you get to put you back into that loop. Rebecca Cox, she's a brilliant mind in user experience, in my opinion. She's absolutely a phenomenal tour de force. And she said that the first company that can fully execute on embedding identity. If you can embed identity on a phone, which is your mobile beacon that you walk around with, he said this company, this wins the whole next decade. Because that is like, at this moment, would be considered like the holy grail of user experience. Being able to manage this deluge of information that's seeming wanting to burst through the doors right now. If you can provide someone with a way to essentially map their subconscious into a digital agent that's working for them on the cloud, and that's what your social media profile is doing. It's a digital agent on the cloud working and negotiating and being interrogated by these networks, determining what should we send to this guy, what's most important to him. If you can map that into your phone, so that becomes essentially not just a feature of these networks, but it becomes part of like an operating system or a platform that you actually have. You own people's attention. You own how people manage attention. It's interesting how she describes identity. Identity is not these things. It's not your password. It's not a calendar. It's not an email. It's not even your login. These things are not identity. So this, just to prove a point, this is not my identity. So statistically, there may be a Petro somewhere else in Bucharest, a 31-year-old guy who loves cartoons. Statistically, this is possible. This is not my unique identity. But I can bet you, statistically, there is no one who has the idiosyncrasies, the preoccupations, the thought patterns, the attention management that I have. I like what I like, I notice what I notice, and there's no one like that. So this is not my identity. This is the thing that we want to, we have desire to protect and keep private and hide. But this is not your identity. Your identity is how you use the software that is on your laptop, the software that you log into on your phone. That is actually your identity. That mapping is what it is. Identity is how users manage their attention. So, when I first got into video games, I remember this video game called Tomb Raider. And in Tomb Raider, the animations were great. But her head essentially consisted of like, I think 3 pixels or something. And the rest was like, imagine the rest, work it out in your head, right? But at the speed of Moore's Law, graphics and resolution and cameras and displays continue to improve. So you got Metal Gear Solid, you got, a driver, and you've got all these systems, 3D engines that improve on graphics, and you've got camera resolution, improving megapixels. As the software and the devices are better able to handle and process information, you get better resolution. Well, right now, as we've entered into what the web made possible, is for systems that can link your pattern of usage of software, the content you consume, the content that you create, and link that into your identity. And so they have a fuzzy sense of who this person is. It's a fuzzy sense. Okay? They have a model of behavior, and there's data that's coursing through these networks to fill that model. And they come out with, okay, this is Petro. This is Petro's sister. This is Petro's dad. Okay? But it's fuzzy. But what does Moore's Law promise us? Moore's Law promises us that the resolution will improve. How long have you been on Facebook? For how many years? 3? 5? What model of how you manage your attention do you think Facebook will have in 20 years? How precise of a model will that be, do you think? As your attention management, as your identity resolution increases, I think it's going to be uncannily resolute. The resolution is going to be very high. And as more things are connected into networks, and as more applications, if you just look on your phone right now, the applications on your phone, most of those require some sort of credential, something to verify that you are the user, because much of the features that they want to surface to you require to know something that is particularly relevant to your unique way of handling your attention, your location, your context. As more of these systems come online, and if Moore's Law continues to push technology the way it's going, you're going to have ghosts that don't even look like ghosts. There are specters on the web that just look like you. Agents that are being interrogated by these systems, by Twitter and Facebook and Google, that will respond or will give signals and vectors that are very, very similar to what you would have done. I have an experience that I'll share you with that in that regard. But this does bring up a massive user experience problem, I think, and that is privacy. Now, I think that in most contexts, people don't talk about privacy in the context of user experience. They talk about it as security and technically and legally, but I think privacy is a user experience problem. It's a user experience problem to solve, because fundamentally, what user experience is making someone's life better. It's improving someone's life. It's making their life more worthwhile. And it's about using design and form and models to align with user behavior and to enable them to have efficacy. And it has to have a balance. No one wants a sword which has got 2 bladed ends on both sides, because the sharper that sword is, you're going to cut yourself with it. And we kind of have a double-edged sword at the moment, I think. The software systems we have are very useful, and they model our patterns of behavior. But they're also coming to learn very, very much about us. And that in itself, in my opinion, is not really the problem. I think the problem of privacy is about who owns the information, who owns your ghosts in those shells. Who does it belong to? Who gets the right to keep your virtual agent or your virtual representation of you? This model of your attention. Who gets to own that and keep that? I had this experience with Pocket App. I use Pocket App. Pocket App is like this application that allows you to read articles later. And it was the end of last year. I was coming home from work. It was almost New Year, and Pocket sent me this. It was either in the app or in the email, and it says, "Hey, check out how you've been using Pocket all this year." And what they had was a graph, and the graph basically showed my usage during the week on average, and it revealed something that was so obvious in statistically, but I wasn't aware of. And that was that on Wednesday, I had a massive spike in how many articles I was reading on Pocket. Now, the thing that really struck me was that I was completely unaware of that behavior. I had a pattern of using this application. They had been able to model how my attention is spent in a way that even I wasn't aware of. But they knew this about me. And they revealed it to me, and I was like, whoa, I feel a little exposed. Now, I was tickled. I wasn't spooked at seeing my ghost. I thought it was interesting, but it made me think. In some respects, Pocket had generated a model of my attention that was better than even what I had through my biases. That's power. That's power. There are those people who are spooked by these ghosts. They are spooked with the sense of information that's being collected about us. And again, I don't think the problem is that it's about information being collected. I think it's who owns this information. There are those who say, well, do not track me. I don't want any of my information collected. Systems can't be trusted, and so I want to be off the grid. But perhaps that easy answer, that reflex, is not necessarily the best answer. Especially as we move into a world where more of our lives are being mediated by technology. It shouldn't be controlled or driven by technology, but mediated by technology. You don't unplug, you never did unplug your landline when you went to sleep, did you? You didn't take out batteries out of the remote or the TV, or unplug the TV when you went to sleep. You just turned it off. And some systems you left them running. The alarm clock was running, waiting for the right moment to wake you up. So there are probably less simpler solutions, but there are the solutions that completely going off the grid. Moore's law is not reversible. I don't even really know whether we have the option of more of our data and signals not being collected. If it's not going to be collected actively through applications that model our behavior, it will be collected passively by hotels like Marriott, registering phone details that go through there. And there'll be enough things when you connect to their Wi-Fi networks, and as your phone enters their sphere, there'll be enough things, enough digital artifacts of your ghost to be able to identify you. If you wanted to stop that from happening, I guess you'd have to go back and stop the creation of the microchip. It would be like the Terminator movie. Yes, we cannot forget how to split the atom. We can forgive, but we cannot forget that. So what we do is we try to work responsibly with what we have. When you download an app on your phone, the way that the privacy user experience is handled is by declaring the permissions that this application would like to have of what it can record of you. And we review this list and we say, do I accept this or not? My problem with that is that as soon as you've accepted this permission to be recorded of you, that in itself, this information, this data, location, your age, your contact, that in itself is not your identity. But what happens as you're using this application with these things as your contact, that is what is being built, your identity, that usage pattern. That is your identity based on this model of interaction. And that's the thing that as soon as you accept these permissions, you no longer own. It gets vacuumed into these systems that create these little ghosts for you in these shells, and it's a representation of your unique identity, and you don't own that. permission is not the same thing as possession. These companies have a ridiculous amount of valuation. And there are those who believe that these are potentially the future operating system. You have this middleware like Android and Windows and Mac OS and iOS. But these are the future operating systems because they control the flow of information and they control how your information comes in. And it's all about connecting you with things that are relevant personally and contextually. In the process, they're amassing amazing digital wealth. And people don't consider that your personal information very much as digital wealth, but this is fantastic digital wealth. Because for the future, for the software of the future, which has to deal with increased information, how are you going to control the flow of information? How are you going to filter out the noise that's coming at you? These people hold the key. And the key has your name on it. But they hold it. Fantastically valuable. But consider how banks and your medical records work, for example. Banks also hold a ledger with your name on it. And the banks own or hold most of your money. But it is still your money, right? And while the money is in the bank, while your money is in that system, the bank can use it, it can operate on it, it can grow it. But given some protocols and some measures, you can withdraw that money and you can move it to other systems. Why can it not work like that with user information, with user profiles, with usage data? Why can it not be that it's something that you own and you give to systems that you use when you need them? And so long as you're happy with the service, they can sell it, make advertising on it, as long as they report to you what they're doing with your information, with your ghost. And you have the right, should you wish to move into other systems. What if you're sharing the information? What if you own the information? Medical records work in a similar way. There's more rules about where you can move medical records in terms of geographically, but they're your medical records. You're accumulating a picture of your medical health through time, but it's yours. Why can't some of the most revealing information about us, this high-resolution image of your subconsciousness, why is that not something that is owned by you? What if the information of your usage of all software was based on particular transactions that can be recorded? And the applications and the services that you use, they can record these transactions and keep them on a cache, and keep them on their systems. But it's not theirs, it is yours. And you allow them to have permissions based on your credentials and their credentials. And each system, just the way that we do with security, with certificate securities, they're authorized and verified. And so if they're a good player, you give them access to the information that's about you. It's probably kept in some sort of massive, like, ICANN database. And even all these applications having different models of how they map your attention, they share certain vectors: buying, selling, sharing, calling, deleting, writing, liking. Transactions and emphatic transactions. They're recorded and they're kept in the cache in the system that you use, but you can withdraw that. So long as they're in the system that you're using, that system can also make derivative information from it. But it's still your information because it's painting a picture of who you are. What if you own that key to your attention, your ghost, your representation, digitally? And when you install an app, you check their certificate and you hydrate that app with your information. You haunt that app like a haunted mansion. But the haunted mansion doesn't own the ghost that's in there. You do. I think that's better user experience. I think that's what user experience is about. It's about balance and form. It's not about getting a very powerful gun that shoots both ways. It used to be that you got to build for the web first. And then I think it was 2007, iPhone came out. And then in the coming years it was built for mobile first. Mobile web. But the future of user experience actually starts in the back end. User experience is not only about visual design. It's about timing, it's about form, and it's about balance. User experience starts in the unseen realms in the back end with predictive systems that filter information and process it. It's not mobile first, it's not desktop first, it's back end predictive first. What excites me about what I do as a developer and someone trying to think of new ways to ship technology and new platforms to deploy technologies and new business models and things like that, it fascinates me just how quickly things change and just how much room for playing and thinking differently we actually have. One of the most stifling and I think foolish things that we can think is that we already have all the answers. The easy answers are not always the right answers. And there is a bias for us to ignore things that seem difficult to accomplish. But Wikipedia, for example, shows that things which seem impossible to accomplish, the things that seem impossible, sooner or later, connectivity and Moore's law not only make them possible, but they make them very probable. And so when we think about user experience, and as you're listening to talks that are going to be presented today, challenge yourself to really think what is probable and what is possible. Not to think, what are the easy answers? I'm a designer, I'm a developer, that's what's expected of me, to color in these boxes. Perspective matters. Is that a phone you have in your pocket? Or is that a computer that you have in your pocket that can do telephony? Perspective matters, thinking outside the box. And even though most of the work that we will actually do with design will eventually touch screens, these glass surfaces, design does not start there. The changes in the technology landscape mean that we're constantly having to rethink what the user experience should be like. Because technology is moving so fast. But one thing remains the same. One thing always remains at the center. The user. We're building systems for the efficacy of human beings, to make their life worthwhile. You have a subconscious, ignoring that fan, listening to this man's voice, so that you can be more efficacious in what you're doing, so that you can make the most value of this moment. That's the only boundaries I think we have to play with. So at the end of the day, our job is to build models and to build solutions. But not everyone has the answers. And the world is moving fast enough that those answers quickly expire. My hope is that as you will listen to the talks in this conference, and when you go back to your work, and to your jobs, where you're challenged with very down-to-earth problems, that you dare and you would risk things from a different perspective. Thank you very much. Enjoy the conference.
If anyone has a question, put your hand up and we'll get a mic to you. What you're saying made me think a great deal, because I worry a lot about privacy of my data. And I'm not like terribly stressed about it, I just worry in the abstract. But you're what, 31 did you say? I'm a couple of years older than that. And it's I wonder sometimes, do you know of any research that suggests that people who have never known a life before the internet actually have the same expectation of privacy and ownership of data that you and I have? So I wonder if my kids just don't give a shit as much as I do, because I've lived in a world where data isn't owned by Facebook, Google, etc.
I heard once, I think it was 2 years ago, at one of the developer conferences, one of those social networks that was up on the screen, that essentially privacy was essentially obsolete. It was a thing of the past. It was a social fabric that had expired. I actually don't think that. I don't believe that. But certainly I think it's certainly a fact. Well, I haven't done research, but I think it's certainly a fact. When you look at Instagrammers, for example, and Snapchatters, that your children are far more open to expressing themselves on digital platforms. And they lead the way in that regard. I think that the challenge has been for enterprises and people, recruiters, for example, to not judge them for being so expressing what they had, their own tendencies, but they knew better in terms of how not to expose them. And so there is, for example, this thing happening where people want the right to be forgotten, you know. And I think, may I speak? I'm a single guy, I don't even have children, but may I speak to you as a father? You know, I think as a parent, it's your responsibility to teach your kids judgment. But I do think that we build systems so that they can work for us, not so that we can work for the systems. And so I think there is also a technical solution to the problem. You know, the mistakes that your children make, they will have to own up to them. If they're sharing too much information, you know, but they should have the right to actually own that. They own the mistakes, but they can have the right to withdraw and own that information. And so there is a component where you just as a human being have to live decently, you know, and you have to show prudence and things like that. But technically we have solutions for some of these issues, you know.
So you're saying that actually it could be that people will be forced to live better because they're living more out in the open?
I actually don't think people can be forced to live better. I think they will just make those mistakes. And I think, and this is just a gut feeling, that we will learn to be more lenient about what people are saying. At the moment, we don't see that, because as soon as you say something that's considered all not politically correct, you'll be pilloried. The pitchforks, the digital pitchforks will come out, and you'll never be able to come on Twitter ever again. But I think that part of the society adapting to technology is realizing that things which are tweeted at the spur of the moment don't necessarily represent, as not someone's entire representation. And I think we were talking, one of the speakers there, or over coffee somewhere, that, you know, when people are actually in your presence, they're much more nuanced, you know. And so I think that there'll be a social aspect where people will be saying, okay, you know what, we've all thought these thoughts. They're just here in record. But that's my gut. That's at least my hope. My hope is we'll get there. We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
I hope so too. Everybody here, if you're Romanian, you're A, younger than me, and there is a history here of totalitarian government. I'd be interested to know who amongst you worries about the data that is stored by these big companies and what they know about you. Okay, it's not 50% of you, which is interesting. Does anybody have a question for Petro before he goes and sits down and has a cup of coffee? Mr. Stephen Hay, you have a question.
Yeah, Petro, thank you for the presentation. It was great. Maybe you can help me with this chicken and egg thing that I have with. I think your assertion was at the beginning that there's that these pieces of software, they kind of bring out this latent attention management that you have. So the way, like this way you would deal with your attention just kind of gets pulled out. But as opposed to something like fingerprints, which are kind of a unique identifier that don't change, how influential do you think that the software, the design of the software is in changing the way people manage their attention?
Oh, it does. It does. For example, you've gone to restaurants with your significant other, and how often was it that you did this when the beauty is standing before you? You know what I mean? And we were having a conversation like a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of days ago, talking about how a restaurant discovered that people were complaining at a restaurant that the food took longer to come to the table. And the restaurant discovered actually people were spending so much time on their phones, not looking at their menus, but on the phones talking about, oh, I'm here, I'm there, I'm with so-and-so, that the whole process of getting to the restaurant and getting food on your table took forever. And it does change our behaviors. And actually, some of the applications that are being developed are exposing latent behavior that's not even healthy, addictive patterns, you know. But the difference between a fingerprint and what social systems and network applications do is I think that your fingerprint, yes, is unique, and it's essentially like a pointer, a very unique pointer to you, you know. These digital systems, with their full fuzzy logic, however, are exposing essentially fears and values and hopes. That's what they're exposing. You're lonely. You go to Facebook and see what's up. Start liking people's photographs. You know, you desire connection. So you go to Twitter to connect with people of shared interests. You know, or you go to another network. You know, you want to buy something. Maybe you don't go into these horizontal solutions like messaging applications. You go to a vertical solution like Amazon or something, where it is about knowing who you are and getting something, fulfillment, right at your door tomorrow. You know, so there are these desires, these urges. And some of these things shouldn't be solved with immediate fulfillment of a material product. Some of these shouldn't be solved with an immediate connection with another human being who is miles away. You need to deal with the people in your home. You had an argument that day with someone in your home, you don't ignore them and disappear into a digital world, although that behavior has been exposed and made really easy for you. That way of managing your attention is not healthy, but it's exposed for you. You know, these digital functional saviors, you know, it's not always healthy. But it is, what it does is expose our values and our fears and our hopes. And I think that's the thing, more so than how much they know about you, those fears and hopes are deeply private and deeply personal. And I think that's a little bit the rub, you know, with these systems, I think.
Last call for any more questions for Petro? Give me a wave. There's a lady here.
Thank you very much for your speech. It was very, very interesting, and I like the way you linked psychological subjects with the web. I think self-awareness is a very important thing for people in general. And my question is, do you think apps and software that monitor our activity could help us be more happy by giving to us feedback about these ghost shows by giving us a feedback about a record of what we're doing that we're not conscious about.
An objective record of what you think you did, but this is actually what you are doing.
Yeah, like that was very... Sorry. I was very impressed when you said that you got that email from that app that showed you a record of what you were doing, but you weren't aware of that. So maybe these softwares and apps can help us know ourselves better. That's my question.
Yeah. You know, I think what you're going to continue to hear much more about is AIs, and you've got Cortana, Siri, M, you know, these digital agents. And what's developing as a really, really, really interesting user experience area is, for example, conversational user experience with computers, where you actually are having a conversation and the computer knows enough about you and your network and your systems and your context to actually be able to continue a conversation and say, okay, suggesting things, listening to your feedback. And along those lines is a concept under the category, for example, of digital coaches, who in a sense it's like gamifying areas of your life. So you want to go to bed earlier, or you want to be, you know, you've got these basically glorified pedometers that measure how much you're walking. And during the course of your day, you can look and see, well, I was supposed to have done all of this walking or all of these metrics in order to be healthy, and you can check against that to see how you're doing. Now, maybe you can have an AI or an agent that says, you know what, you're really falling behind on preparation for this and this thing. You got these emails from this guy, you're ignoring him, what's up with that? You know what I mean? Your system will know these things, you know, because it can read through your inbox, and it can filter spam, and can filter people who are on your network. And I do think you're going to be seeing this as a really, really, really interesting area of user experience. Really, really interesting. It's not a coincidence that some of the biggest network software companies are coming out with digital agents. You know, it's absolutely, in my opinion, it's not a coincidence. It's how they're dealing with exponential growth in information abundance. We don't go searching for information. Information comes to us, and everything about the way we live our lives is more and more of that is going to be able to be picked up by software and processed, and derivative information coming out of that. And an obvious use case is for feedback. You know, on metrics in yourself, that quantify itself. You know, I really do find it interesting the notion of having a digital coach. Yeah.
There's time for one more question if there is one. Any more? Excellent. You can always grab Petro at the after party or in the break and ask him anything if you're shy. So give a round of applause to Petro Salema.